Alright, Tube, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Remake. And what today is something a little small, a little different, a little weird, but it's still interesting to me because I love discovering new things about this game, stuff that I've never seen before, despite having been playing this game for off and on for almost 2 years now, right? So what we're looking at today is the stamp logo, but specifically the graffiti that you see kind of throughout all of the game. Now, with an initial playthrough of the game, you have no idea what this is, and it's not until like Chapter 5, A Dog's Pursuit, that we kind of learn that it's, at least in the tunnel within Chapter 5, it's kind of like a code for Avalanche to kind of point you in the direction of which way to go. Whichever way his nose is pointing, that's the direction you're supposed to go, essentially. Now, what I'm not actually sure of is whether or not the graffiti that we see all throughout the game is meant to be for Avalanche, because it seems like that specific mission, that's what we're using it for. But we see graffiti everywhere, so I don't know if it's just like random people like spray painting the stamp logo on the wall, if it's meant to be other Avalanche members. Anyways, this graffiti appears as early as at least Chapter 2. I don't think it's anywhere in Chapter 1, because Chapter 1 takes place entirely inside the mock reactor. Wouldn't really make sense if there was graffiti there. But for sure, Chapter 2, and according to the Reddit post that we're going to look at, it's a lot. There's like 30 different graffitis all over like Sector 8 and shit within Chapter 2. But there's specifically one that stands out that I've never noticed, that this person posted on Reddit a couple days back, and from the replies, it seems like nobody else noticed this either. There's randomly an upside down stamp. So this piece of graffiti can be seen pretty much at the beginning of Chapter 2, once you guys get out of like the tunnels and all the shit, and you get out onto the street within Sector 8. Once Jesse gives you the hill material and you go across the rubble breaks, Cloud falls down. Directly to your left will be some like firemen, first responders, whatever they are, that are blocking an alleyway. And directly to the right is just this random upside down stamp logo, stamp graffiti. Big shout out to Nernaeth31, I think is how you say his name, for pointing this out a couple days ago on Reddit. And according to them, this is the only stamp graffiti in the game that's upside down, which is why it's kind of interesting, kind of unique. Now, obviously, I cannot confirm that. I haven't done like a full playthrough every single chapter and just walked along the walls to stare at every piece of graffiti, but now that's been pointed out to me, it's obviously the only one that I've ever seen that's upside down. What's also interesting about this particular piece of graffiti is that the majority of the ones that I can recall from memory right now, like, and just kind of doing like a Google image search of like stamp graffiti, they're usually very, very prominent. Like they stand out a lot, especially for like obviously Chapter 5 where you're using the graffiti. There might be some throughout the game that I'm just not remembering right now where they're kind of somewhat faded, but this one in particular is kind of small. It's really faded looking, and it's upside down, which is what's kind of weird about it. So the obvious question that we have to ask here is, why the hell is it upside down? And to be honest, I don't have an answer for that, especially if it is the only one in the game, like an actual answer. My first thought that I come up with is, it's just like a technical error, which people chalked up a lot of different things throughout this game to technical errors, and I usually write those off, but I can't come up with a reason as for why it would be upside down, other than it being unintentional. And really quick, what I mean by I write those things off is because a lot of people will chalk up like the different Midgars at the end of the game to just being a technical error. Like they put the wrong Midgar in this particular section of the game. It was meant to be this one, so they just write off to a dev error. And I think that's boring and uninteresting. It's a definite possibility. I'm not writing it off completely because again, it could happen. But it's more interesting to discuss multiple different theories and things regarding what we see throughout the game. And I like to think that the attention to detail in this game is pretty goddamn high in the fan service and all that other shit. So I don't like to just subscribe to the idea that some of these interesting discussions that we have are just dev errors. Now, if we want to try to put on our tinfoil hats and give the upside down logo some sort of meaning, I mean, there is meaning to a dog, showing its belly, like laying on its back. That's usually a sign of like fear to like another dominant dog or dominant person or species or whatever. They'll usually roll on the back and show their bellies. It's just like a thing. So maybe it's like a shot at Shinra potentially, since it's their logo. I don't know. Now that's me reaching probably harder than I've ever reached before, because I don't think that it being upside down necessarily matters. Now the placement of the logo, I think, is possibly there for a reason, because even though I keep calling it logo, the graffiti is upside down, the nose actually does still point to something. It's still facing the direction of this alleyway, and this is the alleyway that we actually end up walking down after Cloud gets the vision of Sephiroth and starts following him. This is the actual alleyway we walk down. Now during that vision, and this is probably why a lot of people have never seen this before, you can't really make it out during this segment because of all the staticky vision and the filter and stuff like that. It actually took me a while right here to like try to look for it. It just was blended in really, really well, and then I eventually do notice it. So unless you notice it during this segment before the Sephiroth stuff happens, you're never going to know it's there. Because I'm assuming most people, whenever the ground crumbled, they probably just walked forward. It's a relatively linear game, and went on to the Sephiroth stuff, and that's why it's kind of somewhat been hidden this entire time, because I've never heard anybody talk about this. But going back to what I was saying about the nose of stamp pointing towards the alleyway, maybe like theoretically within the lore or something like that, it's an alleyway that Avalanche members can use to maybe sneak around Sector 8, or maybe like it leads to like an avalanche hideout within Sector 8 somewhere within that alleyway. Like obviously it's not anything that we can do in the game or ever interact with, and something we'll probably never ever know, but maybe that's like the theory behind it. And actually a few of the things I just thought of while recording, if we're going to try to give this upside down stamp some sort of meaning, an upside down dog could also symbolize death, right? It's laying on its back, it's dead. So maybe it's like a slight, another kind of like jab at Shinra, maybe saying that they're going to kill Shinra, take Shinra down, whatever the case. But also could mean, if we're going with the idea of it being a dead dog, potentially, we see that logo, and then not long after that we run into Sephiroth. So maybe it's like foreshadowing for the character, not necessarily anything for the game world. Because right after that we run into Sephiroth, and then Cloud Satch, remember Nibelheim, and all this other shit. I'll be honest, while recording, I came up with more ideas for this stamp logo than I thought. Going into it, I was just going to go with the idea that it's a technical error, but maybe there is meaning to it. I just don't know. If there was meaning to it, I feel like we'd see more throughout the game. Maybe there are. Again, this person on Reddit says it's the only one in the entire game, but I cannot confirm that. Maybe you guys can. For starters, if there's more than one stamp graffiti upside down throughout the game, anywhere else, even if there's just one more somewhere, I think it would have some sort of meaning. But if it really is the only one throughout Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I'm assuming also the UP DLC, then I feel like it's gotta be a technical error. Now, I do think that, again, the placement's probably intentional. They probably meant for there to be a stamp graffiti there. But whether or not they meant for it to be upside down, that's kind of hard to say. But my dudes, that's where we're going to wrap the video up. I somehow made a 7 or 8 minute video about this. I don't know how that just happened. I want to pass off to you guys. For starters, have you ever seen this before? Have you ever noticed this? Do you think it has any sort of meaning? Do you think it's intentional or not? And is it the only upside down stamp graffiti in throughout the entirety of the game? Even stamp logos. Like if there's posters, are there upside down posters somewhere potentially in the game? Again, if we can track down an upside down stamp somewhere else throughout the game, then I think it does have some sort of purpose, some sort of meaning. But otherwise, I don't know that it matters too much, my dudes. That's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't. We'll say more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @dash_YT, and my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Hey, you alright? Don't worry. We'll get you looked at soon enough.
Pretty sure the guys from Sector 7 are on their way.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.